Welcome to this exclusive decoding of Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. We're really diving into his mind today
That's right. We want to unpack his core thoughts, his beliefs, that whole worldview.
and understand how India's, incredibly rich and diverse culture has really shaped him.
Exactly. Our goal really is to figure out the fundamental principles behind his actions, his decisions.
And we'll do that by looking closely at what he himself has said and his life experiences.
We've got a lot of his insights to work through together.
It should give us a pretty unique window, wouldn't you say, into his views on leadership, spirituality.
India's place in the world, his own personal journey. It's
So,
quite a scope.
okay, let's start with the foundations. His foundational beliefs.
He often says, doesn't he, that his strength isn't personal.
Right. He says it comes from the 1.4 billion Indians and India's thousands of years of timeless culture and heritage.
It's quite striking how deeply he connects his own identity to that collective. He sees himself almost like a vessel.
Carrying the essence of thousands of years of Vedic tradition. Yeah. And the teachings of Swami Vivekananda.
Who is all about mixing spirituality with social action. So there's this sense of history, of responsibility to a legacy.
Absolutely. And you see it when he talks about meeting world leaders.
Oh yeah, that line is powerful.
He feels it's not just him, Narendra Modi, standing there.
But 1.4 billion Indians doing so. It really emphasizes that collective strength idea.
It frames so much of how he talks about India's role, doesn't it?
It does. This inherent lean towards peace. India as the land of Buddha, of Gandhi.
So inherently about nonviolence, harmony.
That's the idea. A nation seeking harmony, not conflict. Not with nature, not with other nations.
Okay, so that sets the stage for his global view. Now let's maybe unpack the experiences that shaped him, his early life.
Right. He's spoken about growing up in extreme poverty, a small mud house, no windows,
But here's the interesting part. He says they never really felt the burden of poverty.
which sounds counterintuitive, but his explanation is quite revealing.
Yeah, he says they had no basis for comparison, the analogy he uses.
He's about never having worn shoes. If you've never had them, you don't feel you're missing out. It speaks to a certain resilience, maybe?
Or maybe finding contentment in simpler things.
Yeah.
It's a key point for understanding his perspective on, well, material things.
Definitely. And then there are the stories about his parents, his mother's hard work.
And his father's discipline. That story about his footsteps being like the village clock.
Little details, but they paint a picture of the values, right? Discipline, punctuality.
And cleanliness, too, despite the poverty. He talks about heating water in a copper pot.
Just to iron his clothes. It shows this emphasis on self-respect, presentation, no matter the circumstances.
And it wasn't just outward stuff. His mother's innate spirit of service, her knowledge of traditional remedies.
That clearly left a mark, fostering that sense of community responsibility, maybe.
It seems these early struggles built a certain inner strength, his message to young people facing hardship.
No matter how dark the night may seem, morning is bound to come. That's deep-seated optimism, isn't it?
Especially coming from his background and the advice that follows.
Focus on doing something, not just getting and becoming. Action over acquisition.
That feels very central to his whole philosophy.
And it seems to lead quite naturally into his spiritual journey later on.
Those 2 years roaming the Himalayas, searching for purpose, minimalist living.
He doesn't share loads of specific spiritual moments, but the search itself, that yearning for meaning beyond the material, is clear.
And it wasn't just internal. He mentions pushing physical limits, sleeping outside in the cold.
Building resilience, testing himself.
Yeah, and then the influence of figures like Swami Vivekananda becomes really apparent.
That anecdote about Vivekananda at the Kali temple, unable to ask for material things.
Modi says that really instilled a spirit of giving in him, focusing beyond personal wants.
And Vivekananda's whole philosophy emphasized serving others as a form of worship.
You see that theme pop up again. He talks about choosing to care for a fasting saint during Navaratri.
Instead of going to his aunt's wedding, an early sign of prioritizing service, spiritual practice.
And his time at the Ramakrishna Mission Ashram, guided by Swami Vivekananda,
That mentorship seems key in steering him towards public service.
which is how he frames his current role, right? As an extension of that spiritual commitment serving the nation.
Exactly. It's all interconnected in his narrative.
Okay, so we've looked at personal foundations, spiritual leanings. Let's talk about the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh.
He joined quite young, drawn by patriotic songs, the emphasis on serving the nation.
And he frames it as really instilling core values, this idea that everything you do.
Studying, fitness, whatever,
Hmm.
should be for the nation's strength. It seems deeply ingrained.
He often points out the scale of the RSS volunteer network, too, the social service aspect.
Right, mentioning Seva Party working with the poorest, and Vanvasi Kalyan Ashram with tribal communities, highlighting the grassroots work.
There was also that interesting point he made about the labor union motto.
Ah, yes, the RSS-affiliated one. Workers unite the world, instead of the usual workers of the world unite.
A subtle difference, but maybe pointing to a different ideology.
Yeah.
Unity rooted in the nation first.
It can suggest that, yeah. A distinct perspective on nationalism and globalism.
So how does he conceptualize India itself?
Primarily, he sees it as a cultural identity, a civilization. Ancient roots that go deeper than all the linguistic and cultural diversity.
He uses examples to show that underlying unity, right?
Yes, like the stories of Lord Ram being known everywhere, variations of the name across India.
And that ritual of remembering all of India's rivers when you bathe. Powerful symbols of a shared culture.
It's a unity built over centuries through stories, traditions, pilgrimage routes.
He contrasts that with the Western idea of nations being more like administrative systems.
Exactly. For him, India's unity is cultural, historical, spiritual, not just political.
Understanding that cultural identity piece is crucial for grasping his vision. Okay, let's shift to Mahatma Gandhi.
Another huge influence, especially as they're both from Gujarat, Modi expresses deep admiration.
For Gandhi's sense of duty, right, renouncing comfort to serve India, his lasting impact.
And specifically, how Gandhi practiced his principles, like his focus on cleanliness.
Not just preaching it, but living it. And his ability to mobilize ordinary people.
Turning them into freedom fighters, that power of connection.
And that famous story of Gandhi meeting King George V in his simple dhoti.
Yeah, it shows that quiet confidence, that unique conviction Modi seems to admire.
So understanding these influences helps frame his approach to geopolitics, perhaps.
I think so. While he avoids direct comparisons to Gandhi, he definitely sees himself carrying a huge responsibility for India.
Drawing strengths from the people, the heritage. He often mentions that 2013 statement.
The idea that India will neither look down on anyone nor look up to anyone. Sovereign equality.
Seems like a core principle in his foreign policy.
And he always links it back to India's cultural values, global peace, brotherhood, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
Which translates to?
The world is one family. He brings up initiatives like one sun, one world, one grid, one health.
Culminating in the G20 motto under India. One Earth, one family, one future.
It positions India as a natural peacemaker, drawing on Buddha and Gandhi's legacy. Not just strategy, but identity.
How does that play out in specific conflicts, like Russia-Ukraine?
He stresses India's good relations with both sides and his firm belief that the only way out is negotiation, dialogue, not the battlefield.
And on India-Pakistan, a much more complex history there.
He acknowledges the shared past before 1947, the pain of partition, and the hostility since. He attributes a lot of the ongoing issues to a terrorist mindset, he says, originates in Pakistan.
That's quite a strong statement.
It is, but he also points to his own attempts at outreach, inviting Pakistan's leader to his swearing-in, his visit to Lahore.
Suggesting the door isn't completely closed, perhaps, despite the challenges.
Maybe. It's complicated. He also touches on sports briefly.
Right, cricket bringing people together. Even India-Pakistan matches. Just about who played better on the day.
And mentioning football's rise in India, that mini Brazil village. A nice little human touch.
Okay, let's talk about his relationship with the U.S., specifically Donald Trump.
He often brings up the Howdy Modi event in Houston. Trump sitting in the audience, then that spontaneous laugh around the stadium.
Suggesting a kind of mutual trust, maybe a shared showmanship?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
He also sees a parallel in their philosophies. Trump's America first, Modi's nation first.
Prioritizing national interest. He also mentioned being surprised by Trump's welcome at the White House.
Yeah, the informality, Trump's knowledge of U.S. history. He felt it created a strong initial bond.
And Trump has continued to speak positively about him.
Apparently so, suggesting some lasting personal connection beyond just politics.
When it comes to negotiating, Modi's approach is
Putting India's interests first, but doing it positively, constructively. Trying not to cause offense.
he thinks Trump looks far more prepared for a potential second run.
That's what he noted, yes. And having a strong team, he also mentioned positive interactions with others like Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramaswamy.
And Elon Musk. A long-standing relationship there.
Since his time as chief minister of Gujarat, apparently.
Before we move on, he also talked about domestic efforts against corruption.
Right, a huge focus. Removing 100 million fake names from government lists. Implementing direct benefit transfer.
Saving significant amounts of money, he claims.
Yes, presented as a major administrative achievement.
Okay, now, the relationship with China.
Yeah.
Crucial, complex.
He starts by emphasizing the long history. Ancient cultural economic ties. A time when India and China together were over half the world's GDP.
Putting current issues in a much broader historical context.
Exactly. While acknowledging the border disputes, the 2020 tensions, he also mentions things returning somewhat to normalcy after meeting President Xi.
And emphasizing ongoing dialogue to restore the pre-2020 situation. Dialogue over discord.
Yes. He talks about the Asian century, where healthy competition between India and China is natural.
But should never become conflict.
Yeah.
That seems to be the key message. Coexistence.
Right. Looking more broadly at the world, he felt COVID exposed everyone's vulnerabilities.
And should have led to more unity.
That was his hope. But he expresses concern that the world actually became more fragmented, international organizations struggling.
He sees current wars as being about more than just resources now.
And advocates strongly for cooperation, development over expansionism, global interdependence.
Acknowledging the widespread worry about current conflicts, hoping for peace.
Yes, a clear desire for stability.
Okay, now we need to address a very sensitive topic. The 2002 Gujarat riots. He provides quite a bit of context when asked about this.
He does. He points to the series of terrorist attacks that happened before it, the 1999 hijacking, attacks on the Red Fort, Parliament in 2001, 9/11 globally.
Setting the scene, the atmosphere at the time. And he reminds people he only became chief minister in late 2001.
Right, while Gujarat was still dealing with a massive earthquake aftermath. And he had no prior government experience. Became an MLA just days before the Godra incident.
He calls the Godra train burning itself a horrific tragedy in a volatile environment.
And he pushes back against the idea these were the biggest riots ever in Gujarat, citing history, like the 1969 riots lasting months. He terms that narrative misinformation.
The key point he stresses, though, is the judicial outcome.
Yes. He emphasizes that the judiciary investigated thoroughly, twice, found him completely innocent, and those responsible were punished.
And he points to the 22 years of peace in Gujarat after 2002 as evidence of a shift.
Attributing it to moving away from, quote, vote bank politics towards sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas, or sabka prayas, together with everyone, development for all, trust from all, and efforts by everyone. He also defines vote bank politics briefly for context, basically, prioritizing specific groups for votes.
Okay, so how does he handle criticism more generally?
He says he welcomes it, calls it the soul of democracy, believes critics should be kept close.
For improvement, for insight.
He draws a sharp line between genuine criticism, which he says needs research and analysis.
And allegations, which he feels often lack research and just jump to accusations.
And he thinks a lot of what passes for criticism today is actually just allegation.
He uses that analogy, doesn't he? The fly versus the bee?
Right. The fly spreads dirt, the bee collects nectar, but can sting when needed. Advocating for journalism to be like the bee truthful, impactful.
Interesting analogy. Now, turning to his electoral success, winning repeatedly in the world's largest democracy, how does he explain it?
Primarily, he puts it down to trust. The trust the people of Gujarat and then India placed in him.
And he links that trust to his government, ensuring welfare schemes reach everyone without discrimination.
Governance rooted in people's well-being, not just winning elections. That's the message.
He also speaks about viewing the nation as divine, the people as divine, guiding his service approach.
And mentions having no personal conflicts of interest, plus the dedication of millions of party volunteers.
The logistics of Indian elections are just mind-boggling.
Absolutely. Nearly 1 billion voters, over 1 million polling booths, the effort to ensure access.
Making sure no one is more than 2 kilometers from a booth. Using helicopters, setting up a booth for one single voter in a forest.
He clearly feels India's election commission sets a global standard, says it should be a case study.
So, with all that electoral success comes power. How does he view power and responsibility?
He actually rejects the label powerful, prefers humble servant or prime servant. Service is the core principle.
Says he never got into politics for power games, but to serve. Focus on productivity, not power itself.
And on loneliness, which often comes with such high office.
He says he never experiences it. Talks about this philosophy of 1 + 1.
Where the other one represents the almighty. Service to mankind is service to God, drawing again from Vivekananda.
Even during the pandemic lockdowns, he found ways to connect.
Yeah, video conferencing for work, but also personally calling older party volunteers, just checking in, sharing memories, finding connection that way.
Let's talk about his work ethic. He's known for working extremely long hours.
He kind of pushes back on being singled out for it, points to farmers, soldiers, laborers, mothers.
Saying their hard work motivates him.
Exactly. And the responsibility given to him by the citizens, that drives him to give his absolute best.
He recalls those promises he made back in 2014.
Yes. Never slack on hard work, never act with bad intentions, never do anything for personal gain. Standards he says he still lives by.
His main inspiration then comes from.
Serving 1.4 billion people, understanding their hopes, their needs.
Okay, a quick insight into his thoughts on Srinivasa Ramanujan, the mathematician.
He expresses deep respect, sees a connection between science and spirituality in Ramanujan's story.
Ramanujan believed his ideas came from the goddess he worshipped.
Modi interprets that as insights emerging from deep spiritual discipline, which he sees as total immersion in your work.
He also makes a distinction between information and knowledge.
Right. Knowledge is deeper, evolved through processing, reflection, not just raw data.
Fascinating. Okay, let's unpack his decision-making process. How does he approach making big calls?
He credits his extensive travel across India before becoming PM, giving him that grassroots understanding.
Says he carries no baggage that restricts him.
And the main yardstick is always, my country first. Also using Gandhi's advice, consider the impact on the poorest person.
He maintains multiple information channels.
Yes, to get diverse perspectives. And he adopts a learner's mindset, asks questions, plays devil's advocate to really probe issues.
Sometimes shares ideas informally first.
To gauge reactions, test the waters before finalizing. He uses the COVID economic response as an example.
Resisting pressure to just copy global theories, instead focusing on preventing hunger, social unrest first.
A decision he feels ultimately helped India's economy. He stresses his capacity for risk-taking.
When it's for the country's benefit. And taking ownership of decisions. Builds trust, he believes.
Makes sense. Looking ahead now to technology, specifically artificial intelligence.
He's quite bullish on India's role here, isn't he?
Very much so. He argues AI development will be incomplete without India because of the sheer talent pool.
Refers back to a speech at the AI summit in Paris about global cooperation.
And uses that analogy. If AI mostly learns from Western data, it might have biases, like assuming everyone writes right-handed.
So India's inclusion is crucial for truly global, unbiased AI.
That's the point. He mentions India is working on specific AI applications, creating a marketplace for GPU access.
Compares it to the rapid 5G rollout, contrasting the number of AI engineers.
Yeah, suggesting India has abundant talent compared to, say, the US pool, emphasizing that AI is powered by human intelligence, which India has plenty of.
He also touches on the success of Indian-origin CEOs in the US, Pichai, Nadella, Krishna.
Attributing it to cultural values, dedication to both birthland and workland, striving for excellence, ethics.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We really have journeyed through his thoughts, beliefs, experiences.
Trying to understand his formative years, spiritual side, his vision for India, how he sees global challenges.
From the humble beginnings, the cultural influence, to leadership, peace, technology, the key elements shaping his worldview.
We hope this deep dive has given you, our listener, a richer, maybe more nuanced understanding of the man leading the world's largest democracy.
And the principles that seem to guide his actions and decisions.
Of course, this is just scratching the surface, really. There's always more to explore.
Definitely. We encourage you to keep digging into these topics, keep forming your own informed perspectives.
See you soon with another one.